Okay, so Alex, thank you for taking the time to talk to me today. I very much appreciate it, as will the students at the University of Waterloo who will be listening to this many for a few years into the future, I expect. But I thought I would start just by asking you to uh, describe what you do. You're active in a wide range of roles today, and I'm interested in you basically describing those and telling me how you got to this position where you are engaged in all these roles.
First of all, thanks for having me here, Peter, and I'm glad to help university students because it seems like yesterday I was in their position, but it's been about 20 to 25 years. The one commonality between all my roles right now is they're all focused on growing the early stage tech ecosystem in the Toronto Waterloo region in particular, or Canada as a whole. And so there's the three different roles I play right now are I I'm the Canadian partner for Angelist. Angelist is a platform that helps companies raise capital for their companies, and so I launched the efforts in Canada and now run the Canadian. I'm like the Canadian partner. I am the co-founder of TechTO, which is actually a poorly named organization because it now spans across Canada. We're in Montreal and Vancouver, and the idea there is to provide a way for founders and aspiring leaders and innovators to learn from each other and provide some advocacy for the early stage tech ecosystem. And finally, I have a small fund where I invest in pre-seed companies. Um, all three of these are related and complement each other and do different aspects of helping grow a healthy tech environment in Toronto Waterloo. Now, the way I got here, it was, I would love to say it was planned, but it was basically a journey where I explored different parts of business and I always felt passionate. I've always been passionate about building companies. I've always been passionate about technology, but I've done different I've done different things. I've done professional services. So I started my career doing tech M&A when at a company called Lehman Brothers in New York. So Lehman doesn't exist anymore, and most of my clients don't exist anymore. I helped AOL buy MoviePhone. I helped EMC buy Data General, and what that taught me was gave me a work ethic. I worked a lot of hours. It also gave me an exposure to the business side of technology companies. I also worked at a company called McKinsey, which is a global consulting firm, where I worked in London and Toronto. So those two experiences gave me exposure to enterprises and the language and work ethic of business. Uh, Outside of those, my second stage of my career was working at startups or founding startups. So I worked at startups in San Francisco, New York, and London. The one in London had a 400 million pound exit, and I started the company in Toronto. And again, not an engineer, but now I had experience of operating and building companies. So all those experiences gave me the context, the knowledge, and curiosity to pursue what I've done today. And two of the three roles I created myself. The third one, what I was proactively recruited for based upon my experiences, and it was just happened to be fit. So if you took, going back 20 years ago, I could have never planned for this. What I did was I had a bunch of different great opportunities which I took. I learned from all of them. I learned from my failures. I learned from my successes, and then created the path that I wanted to follow and passionate about. I'm optimizing for learning, optimizing for impact, and hopefully it takes care of me and my family as I go forward.
I hope so. And I mean, and listening to what you've said there, your background has provided a lot of, a unique combination of experience, probably, that makes you ideally suited to be considering investments and at the same time providing advice and providing support for people that are in the tech sector. So that's that's very helpful and a very good thing.
Thank you.
You're welcome. The next question, I guess, follows from this, which is that you're obviously involved in the tech sector. Can you talk about why the tech sector is important in Canada or important to Canada, how significant it is, and how our tech sector compares to that of other countries?
So I'll break this down into two separate questions. How important is the Canadian tech sector? There's many different ways to look at this. I think if you look at it the pure growth of GDP, you could see it is growing much faster in Canada, and globally, tech is growing faster than overall GDP. So it is a driver of the future. I think if you then look at Canadian context specifically, is it's a different just tech in general is a very different way than working in the Canadian economy was structured when I moved back. I moved back to Toronto in 2007. And what I noticed was we're overly dependent on natural resources. So either what we're taking from the ground or actually land itself. There's been a big construction and real estate boom in Ontario and Toronto. And second of all, we had a very oligopolistic structure for most of our economy. We have three big telcos, or, we've tried to have incumbent. We've tried to take that down and inject competition, but three big telcos, one or two airlines, and across all our sectors, it felt like a very old way of doing business. And I felt like our natural and it leveraged our natural strengths that from a past era. And if you look going forward, we have a highly educated, highly diverse economy where people from all over the world can come move here, get educated, and contribute. And so the greatest assets we have and the best way to create economic future for this country is taking advantage of those assets like we took advantage of natural resources. And the way to do that is to do it with competing globally. So the tech ecosystem allows us to leverage what we've built, the education system we built, the openness to the world. It also allows us to compete because we're building companies that have to compete globally. So not all oligopolies, not protected. So if we're going to create an economy that thrives and lets us have the standard of living we want, we need this tech ecosystem. And then on top of that, since it's growing fast everywhere, it's a natural place to have people compete and to be part of. Then the second part is, how does Canada compare to other countries? There's so many different ways to measure it. I'd say we're headed in the right direction, but we're surprisingly, on any innovation, any ranking of innovation, we're quite low. You'd expect we'd be a top 5 country, but just I go back from 2010 to recently. There's always like these economists and a bunch of different organizations put these rankings. We're always if we're lucky, we're in the top 20, and that's not where we want to be. We want to be higher, especially because we do have competitive advantages. Again, we have educated talent. We have diasporas. We have people that have gone and worked in the Valley, gone and worked in London, gone and worked in Singapore that have come back and have talents to scale and see what scale is. We have open door policy that allows us to import talent. So we have the core ability to compete. I think what we haven't had historically is the mindset to look abroad and build world beaters. And I think that's changed over the last decade. And you're starting to see it slowly but surely. We're building venture scale or large businesses. We're building unique perspectives on different startups and different ideas. Perfect example, everyone's favorite company in Canada right now, Shopify, has, if you look at it, it's the most valuable company that's IPO'd since Facebook. And just gives an idea of what we can do if we get the right leadership and take advantage of what's here. But we still have a lot to do, and until we start producing more and more Shopifys, it's going to be hard to be self-sustainable. And I think that's what we need, to create a self-sustainable ecosystem that allows us to grow and compete globally. And I'm not saying we need only venture scale businesses, but we do need companies and people to have success, because more success breeds success, and that's what we haven't had enough of historically.
So you're saying that we're not doing as well as we should be, but you're also saying that we can do as well as we should be, partly because of the characteristics we have with immigration,
Yeah.
and also with the experience of people in the tech sector. Can you talk about the tech sector today? So the people do seem to have more concerns today, perhaps, about privacy, the power of the big tech companies, and perhaps other issues. These things have grown. Governments are considering what to do about it. In many countries around the world, regulation is being considered more. What's your response to that? What do you think about that? And maybe even, have you got thoughts about what you think Canada should do?
Well, I'll try to parse this question in a few
Sure.
pieces to start with. First of all, I think the fact that everyone has an opinion on what should be done or shouldn't be done just explains how important the sector has become. Because if this sector didn't have the potential to change the way we lead our lives or have an impact on the economy, it wouldn't be there wouldn't be conversation. So I think the first thing to realize is it's not that it's big tech companies; it's just that tech is important for the future. I think the other thing, which is very different than past companies, and I think it's not just limited to tech, but it's limited to the world we live in, is it's much harder to regulate these companies than it has in the past. You Most of your assets or the benefit of what you're doing is in the people, and you're moving bits, not atoms. So regulation's hard because it's very easy for a company to hire people in a different country and produce the goods or sell the goods in another country. So so it's created different financial structures, and we've seen difficulties in regulating and different business models than before. Like you see in Europe, where the EU or various countries have told Google, hey, if you have Google or Facebook, if you're using links to newspapers, you have to pay the newspapers a bounty for that link even being there before you send traffic to them. And the response by Google or Facebook is like, fine, we're just going to kill that feature. Doesn't matter. Which is actually probably 180 degrees of what that government was trying to encourage, which was to make their local newspapers and journalists more sustainable. So I think overall, it's a big sector, important sector. It is business being done differently than historically has made it very popular, and lots of people are trying to figure out how do we work with these companies, how do we regulate it. So then you take a couple aspects, privacy. So look, I'm concerned about privacy. I actually take my own actions to try to protect myself online and just protect my privacy. And there's two fundamental problems here, I think, from a government perspective. One is even though we tell people and people say they're concerned about privacy, when they have a choice between more or less privacy and there's a cost to it, they seem to go with less privacy. I think second thing is who has access to that data and how it's being used. Another question. You look at how China uses the data available as a nation state versus how tech companies are using it. There's different ramifications and implications. So if I look at something like privacy, I think it's something where, just like we ask for financial literacy, we should probably be educating people on what is privacy, what's implications, and how should we use it. Then I think, what's the business incentives for more or less privacy? And I think you're going to see more companies, as people get concerned about privacy, will then self-regulate. Apple's making a strategic investment that aligns with what they've always done to advertise that they're a company which protects your privacy, and they've taken steps actually. Every year they're taking steps to more and more make it harder for like cookies to work, or advertising companies to take advantage of the data and the breadcrumbs you leave. So I think government regulation there should be more education on what privacy is and why it's important. Two is there's probably some frameworks we have to learn about, and three is there's going to be financial incentives that take care of it once people care about it. Next thing is taxation. Again, you have European companies trying to tax the revenue a lot, revenue in their countries opposed to profit. I don't have a strong opinion there. I just think it's sort of like whack-a-mole. I'm a big believer that you can ask, why is depreciation for house 30% and for computer 40% a year? It's because that's what the government's decided. And then once the government decides how to do stuff for taxation purposes, if you have a company with resources, they'll try to find a way to optimize it. So it's just a long-term game that makes money for accountants and consultants. I think if I was government, I'd be trying to put, there's probably some areas that regulate, but I think more importantly is what's a long-term implication on employment and income and inequality? And I'd be trying to figure out ways to make sure that there's positive impacts from technology and these big companies, and figure out what can we do to incentivize people to get more involved with the opportunities here. And I think there's going to be more volatility in economic outcomes. Is how do we create a social system that we can support the population throughout these changes? And if I don't have a solution there because it's a complex. You hear people talk about universal basic income. Nice concept. I do believe people need to be working, and people care more about life than just the income. They want to be fulfilled, and part of that is finding gainful employment.
Absolutely, and today there is perhaps a little bit less of that employment around because of COVID-19. And I was keen to get your thoughts on the impact that COVID-19 is having on the tech sector and on traditional companies. And seem to be seeing in some areas the acceleration in the use of technology, perhaps maybe a bit less in some others. I was interested in how you saw that and how you thought information technology would influence the world that we might see beyond the virus, assuming and hoping that that point will come.
Well, again, we're limiting it to information technology, not life sciences or biotech, which hopefully will have a solution, a virus, and for COVID. I think there's two types of changes that might be accelerated due to COVID. One is behavioral changes, and the other is technology changes. So, example, behavioral change is more people working from home. Is it possible? Will it be done? People that might resist it before now getting forced to try it, and it'll accelerate some changes. So I think, and I think along with behavioral changes is regulation changes. So for one example, the two sectors that have been least impacted by information technology, or two of the three, are education and health. The third one, I'd say construction, because if you look at those three areas, productivity's declined over time. And what you see is, let's just take the health sector, for example, right now, is the biggest impediment from productivity improvements from information technology has been government regulation. You need to be, in the States, you have to be regulated and licensed as a nurse or a doctor to practice in the state. With the current pandemic and a shortage of talent, telemedicine is not possible, and people can work across state lines. So if some of this regulation is adopted to be accepted post-pandemic, it has the ability to impact health significantly. If you think about the historical health sector, has a bunch of stakeholders that are built into a way that's self-reinforce, and at some ways works really well, in some ways doesn't. Easiest way to get sick is going to hospital. Easiest way to waste a lot of time is have a doctor's appointment. What technology can we now, if we change our regulations, allows us to get more safer and better quality of healthcare? And then once we open those gates, what I think you'll see a significant change in the impact that IT has in health. I think the next sector you talk about is the working environment. Do we go back to offices? Do we work from home? I'm a bit more skeptical of the long-term changes there. I think you have a lot of people in San Francisco, New York, or Toronto that say, hey, I'm going to work from home. This is great. I'm going to move to Columbus, Ohio, or I'm going to move to Barrie, Ontario. I think those people are all have kids, all have already established themselves in a career, and don't take advantage of a big city. So I think what might happen is you might see, and they don't understand the cultural norms they built with their office and everything like that, and they don't understand what they're missing by not being in office. So I think you're going to see a more adaptable work culture where people can work from home and can work remotely. But I think in the long run, density cities will not change. But the way we use the real estate and the way we work will change, and that'll be enabled by technology improving communication and then maybe improving how logistics. So, for example, restaurants or retail locations may change as people get worried about density, but I think they're there, and there's going to be more business enabled by technology, and it could be just how do we avoid getting overcrowding? How do we shift demand? How do we enable people to feel like they're working closer together? And then I think then you have the new technologies that are emerging. So like I've probably seen 100 different applications, video applications. So beyond talking on WebEx or Skype, with TechTO we now do virtual conferences, and I think we're going to see new forms of entertainment emerge and new forms of communication emerge. I think it depends. The longer this lasts, the more likely to emerge and stick.
Absolutely. But what you are mentioning there, I guess, is that in a number of these areas, innovation is going to be perhaps more important for organizations to be able to compete effectively or to perform versus the other participants in their industry than it has been before. It's going to be more important that they innovate. So, if it is a higher priority, you've been involved in a lot of innovation. So, for larger organizations, especially, what can they do to innovate better, particularly in their use of technology?
So it's funny. Technology is a tool, generally a tool, and innovation is driven by tools, but it's also driven by business practices and business models. So I think it's the realization of how different people are competing that they couldn't compete before with the new tools. And so, for example, if you the obvious way, if people are working more from home, what's the long-term implication? That you can have a distributed workforce, and that means you could be employing someone in India or Singapore or South Africa just as likely as Toronto. So the questions, if I want to be more innovative, there's as a corporation, is trying to understand how are the tools changing the business models and innovating business. And so work from home is the obvious one. You have a team that can be more dispersed. I can hire everywhere, and there's going to be implications about real estate and stuff like that, which I could probably model. The second one, which is probably being ignored, is blockchain. So let's take it further. People are now getting comfortable working from home. How can we use the blockchain to have a more distributed business where we have partners instead of doing large partnerships? How can we have negotiations between entities based on blockchains where the assets are based on a bunch of rules? Or so again, if I want to be innovative and I'm a large enterprise, I'm thinking about that. First is really trying to understand how do tools fundamentally change value change and change the strategy decisions you made in a strategic way, and try to model that and test them out on a small scale to see is there viability, how does this impact me. I think the second thing is, I think the biggest block to innovation in large enterprises is fixed cost, and I think there's a bunch of hidden ones that we don't think of traditionally. So if I look at fintechs, I think the biggest thing that they're doing is they're not taking new technology, they're new business models, and they're competing where our financial institutions don't have large fixed costs or large costs that are hidden that they can't compete with. So I'll take on just an example here. You have 5 large banks, which historically have had wealth managers and advisors in the branches. So then comes along Simple's the world. They not very innovative from a technology perspective, but from a business perspective. They built a brand, they have very little overhead, and can focus on cost to serve those customers very cost effectively. Now, BMO or RBC or TD can go do that tomorrow, but what they have is they have a structure based upon where the relationships sit with individuals in Sherbrooke or Edmonton or Waterloo. And they're like, okay, if we want to fire these people, we're worried that the relationships are going to walk out the door. So we don't know how to get those people to have a relationship with our online presence. And B, I think there's some political overhead. If you go to Quebec and say, hey, we're going to get rid of all the wealth managers in all these small towns, that's 200 people that make 200 grand a year. The Quebec government's going to have something to say about that. Wealthsimple doesn't have to worry about that because they don't have the overhead. So I think, going back, and this has been a bit long answers, first understanding what tools are how tools are changing your business, try to scenario plan around that and what the implications are, and understand what parts of your current value chain or your current business has to fundamentally change and get ahead of that so you can plan for it. So for example, if I thought I had to go to robo advisor as a big bank and I could see that coming a few years ago, how do I stop relying on my wealth advisors and wealth managers in branches, and how do I transition the people there to give me those relationships, and so it doesn't cause long-term problems? Because to do a cold start and see, hey, that we're being attacked here and change, you just can't. You have to. Your cost of changing is probably more painful in the short run than you can pay. So not a clean answer, but understanding the tools and then understanding the implications and planning for it.
Yeah, and it's interesting to listen to your response because what you seem to be saying is that the challenge as far as innovation goes isn't so much, well, is firstly understanding what the tools can do, but then managing the transition, I guess, and the implications, the model through which that will be applied is something that people need to think more about. You're basically saying that this is where there is some difficulty at the moment.
Well, what I'd say is the weakness of every weakness is a strength, and every strength is a weakness. The strength startups have is they have no overhead, they have no politics, they have a whiteboard to go play against. But their weakness is they have no resources. If you think about an enterprise, a large business has all the resources in the world and has all the distribution in the world, so they could outcompete and out innovate. But they have all these stakeholders and processes in place that are resistant to change because they've been optimized for perfection.
Mm-hmm.
And so the cost of that change is significant. And so it's how do you get ahead of those and try to dismantle that yourself and then reconfigure the value chain.
Yeah. And I'm sure there will and are many businesses that will do that successfully. But there are lots of examples of companies which have not. I mean, over the past year,
Yeah.
Sears has gone, Pier 1 Imports have gone, the car industry struggles significantly to transition. So, this is something that's both important and difficult.
Well, it's interesting. Like I have some insight into Sears Canada because they tried to acquire one of the companies I started. I started talking to them, and they saw what was going on, and just it was bad accounting. They were basically had all these stores all over Canada, and they had the warehouses. And so what they were doing is the warehouse, if they were shipping stuff from for e-commerce from those warehouses, and were only charging last mile. They weren't doing a full burden cost. So the stores were subsidizing the e-commerce, and once they started closing down stores, the e-commerce became not profitable, right? And again, going back to
Interesting.
cars, the challenge is you have a whole system built on a certain replacement life cycle. You have fixed costs with embedded unions that they're probably more retired union members than active ones. So how do you think about restructuring your business to reflect that? If autonomy probably means people are buying less cars, but they replace them quicker. And then if EVs mean there's less pieces to replace, so there's less potential for margin because the supply chain has to consolidate. So those are the good thing for them is there's those even in 10 years are predicting only 15% EVs, and who knows when autonomy is fully there. But how do you make those changes with the overhead you've got stuck in there? I don't think they don't know. It's not like it's an unknown unknown. It's a known, but they don't know how to react to it, and they have less moving pieces, and they probably can change everything. Too many things look fixed in the short run, but they should be planning for 5 years from now and trying to make those fixed things unfixed.
Yeah, I conducted an interview a few months ago with someone from the Center for Automotive Research and discussed these these items, and it was an interesting interview. I'm not going to digress into that at the moment, but just to really get a sense of how they were approaching this was, I thought, very interesting and some way to go maybe. So you're the founder of Tech Toronto, which you've already mentioned. They do great work, and I thought it would be important that the people watching got an understanding of what Tech Toronto was, because there's probably quite a few of them who may wish to take advantage of it.
Well, then I'll plug it. You can check it out, our website out at techtoronto.org or techto.org. So the hidden big hairy audacious goal behind TechTO was to change the culture of the Canadian tech ecosystem. So Jason and I started, both of us have worked in other tech ecosystems. He had worked in Seattle, I'd worked in New York, the Bay Area, and London, England. And one thing we noticed was in lots of these other ecosystems, people had a rising tide lifts all boats mentality. And what I mean by that is they would go meet, someone says, hey, you should meet this founder. She's having trouble with marketing. And lots of people will take that meeting not expecting anything out of return, but just to help someone else succeed. And Canadians being very polite will say yes to lots of things, but they don't proactively have, I think, and this goes back to, I think, natural resources and oligopolies. What we found was we don't have a very rising tide lifts all boat, and we're very transactional in how we spend time. So the goal when we started TechTO was to change the culture of this ecosystem. The way we've gone about it is we believed we didn't know what we needed to do. We just know we wanted to do that, and we said we started off with an event, which were let's get founders to share knowledge, not pitch themselves, not pitch their companies, but get on stage, share something about what they learned about making a business successful. And then since then, we've built an organization which does events, many different subjects. We have a membership and we do advocacy, with the whole goal of being an if you want to be involved with technology and innovation, you want to make a difference. Here's an easy way to get involved. Here, you'll find like-minded peers. You'll find people ahead of you that you can learn from, you can collaborate with, you can work, and you can get back to. And we do it via events, large events, small events. We do it online via this membership, where we have like a Slack forum, and we're looking at adding other stuff by sharing content and knowledge. And then we also listen to the ecosystem, and then we'll work with different, Toronto Global, which is trying to help recruit companies here. We'll work with the city to help say what's the messaging we need to get out there. We help launch Elevate. The goal is so if you look at it, there's two aspects. One is help people get involved with the ecosystem, meet the people they need with the knowledge they need and contacts they need to advance themselves in a career right now. And then we take the overall aggregate view and perspective and say, how can we work with different entities to improve the overall ecosystem here? So for example, like with Toronto, how can we get more people to come here and see what's going on and hopefully stick here and add value to the ecosystem? Not a very clean answer, but I think the best way, just go to the website, check out what we do, and then you'll find what we do. And it's variable enough that everyone should get out of it what they need.
Okay, I mean, that was a good answer. And for the people at Waterloo who are looking towards their own startups or involvement in the tech community, they should be going there. It's a good thing, and you've explained that, so that's good. The other thing that you mentioned that you do that I also wanted to ask you to talk about is around your work in investment, partly because for the people who are watching are maybe starting companies, some of them who will be interested in that investment. And so, can you tell me about the work that you do there, and maybe any advice you might want to give them?
So, one thing I purposely, when we launched TechTO, we did not want to get into providing capital to this ecosystem. We didn't feel that organization would be ever in a position to do that. But one thing that's clear to me is one of our disadvantages is we don't have enough risk early stage angel investors that have made money in tech. What you find is a lot of investors here have made money in natural resources, real estate. They have a different mentality. They're looking for downside protection as well as upside returns. But if you go to the Valley, enough people have made money in tech. It's just natural to give a friend an investment, and you do well in that. You start being what they call an angel investor. So what I've done is two things to address this. One is Angelist is a platform where people that have where someone's investing in a company can then represent that company on the platform, saying, "Hey, I'm investing in this company. We're raising on these terms. Why don't you invest behind me?" So they wanted to launch in Canada. They needed help getting regulatory approval. They need help understanding the market. So I basically joined them as a Canadian partner and got that launch, and I still run that today. So that's at a high level, structurally trying to provide another source of capital. And if you look at it, last year, 90% of the capital on the platform in the Canadian companies was from outside Canada. So it's having net new cash into this ecosystem. Second thing is I learned even doing that, there's still not enough people taking that initial check and running into companies very early. So we have lots of VC funds here. There's more than there ever has been, but generally they want to see a product and some customers and some type of what we call traction. The idea behind N49P is I raised a small fund. Right now it's about 10 million USD, and I would write checks of 100 to 300,000 USD, and the reason it's in US dollars, most of my investors are from the US, into really early stage companies. It could be just a team with a concept. It could be just a product. It could be something a bit further along. Goals to write 10 to 12 checks a year. If I look at, I've now invested in about 30 companies. I'd say 20 to 24 are in Toronto, Waterloo. The others are in Montreal and Vancouver. I guess if you're going to start something, I think before you even get to raising money, understand why you're starting it. I think starting a business has become popular or exciting and being glorified over the last few years. If you go look for the right quote, starting a business, even successful ones, is like chewing broken glass in your mouth like 24 hours a day. For every great highlight moment, there's three things that are difficult and challenging and setbacks. So if you're starting a startup, do it because you want to have an impact on the world, not because you're looking for quick money or something glorious. I think then the second thing is if you want to, then I think the best way to be able to raise money is to create something exciting. And what I mean by that is get a team, initial team together that can looks good. And what I mean by that you complement each other, you have different skill sets, and we can understand why this team's good. You have some unique insight into a market, and then you're the team that execute against that. That's what gets people excited. It's like, you know, don't come to me. The worst. So first thing worse is you start a business because hey, it's exciting and you think you're gonna make a quick buck. Second thing is then when people see something taking off and you have all the Canadian versions are deviations of Uber for this, Uber for that. Maybe that's a great analogy, a way to explain it. But if your insight is you saw Uber do something and now you're applying it to another industry, generally people don't get excited because what I think Paul Graham, I think, is the one who says it best, is we're looking for founders to have a secret about an industry. So when someone comes to me and says, hey, there's three of us, I'm the developer, this person's a salesperson, this person's a designer, whatever is needed, and this is our unique insight about this industry, and here's what we've done to prove it a bit, I get excited because you may be wrong, but if you look like you have the right team, you have something, a unique perspective, and you've shown some tenacity to get it started, I'm going to take you seriously and to spend time with you. So I think that's what you should be going to market with. Then how do you find investors? Is look, if you're at University of Waterloo, there's a lot of people start companies. Go reach out to founders and talk to the founders. Then ask the founders who's worth talking to, because we like just generally someone that's one or two steps ahead of you is going to want to help people avoid mistakes and pains they did. So the other thing is I'm always happy for people to reach out to me. I'll get back to you, not immediately, but I'll get back to you. And you can do it at alex@techtoronto.org.
Thank you. Okay, so just a couple more questions. First of all, during COVID-19, if I am a tech entrepreneur, what do I need to ride this out, or what should I be thinking about as far as my business is concerned today?
So I think it depends how big of a company you have. If you're an individual or if you already have a business. So I'll assume you already have. If you're an individual, quick answer is make sure you have enough cash flow to survive, and it might mean thinking about additional income as you build your business. I think if you're a business, it's you need cash. So as a founder, the first thing you have three jobs, but the first job is to not run out of cash. And right now, what I found out, with COVID, life changed dramatically in overnight. So the first thing is go revisit all the assumptions about the next year and try to do some scenario planning. Try to go 2 levels deeper. So your customers may not look like they're affected right now, but understand who their customers are. So basically everything you've been planning, go double check the assumptions and then change rapidly based on those assumptions. And for stuff you can't measure, you're not sure about, understand a few different things and try to get early reads on it. So I think it's just being smart to reality and not putting your head in the sand. And then based upon what you find, the reactions are different for every company. I've had companies that had to lay off 70% of staff because they said, we think this could affect our industries for 24 to 36 months. We need to survive it. And what they've done is they've gone from focusing on sales to focusing on customer relationships and building the right product. So when things return to normal for them, they have the best product and they have a few deep relationships they can use as reference points and hopefully grow really rapidly and hire people back. I've had other companies that have been positively impacted, and the thing they need to do is they're going to survive, but what they need to do is actually they need to go aggressively recruit because their businesses were growing so fast that edge cases from the technology perspective became main cases because they went from 10,000. One company went from 10,000 users to 300,000 users in the last 3 months. So something that would only affect 1,000 people was once 10 times per month is now affecting you 300 times per month. So they've had the opposite thing: is how do you recruit remotely? Where do we efficiently hire? So, but I think the key thing is to take a step back, to realize how things have changed and do it a couple levels deep, right? not, hey, restaurants are, there's a shortage of toilet paper today, there's not going to be toilet paper for the next 6 months. It's understanding why something's happening and try to understand what the implications are for the next 6 to 12, 18 months.
Good advice. And you also set up Elevate Toronto, and
Yes.
I thought I wanted to make sure that I asked you about that and allowed you to introduce that to the people who are watching as well, because this is something that people should know about.
Yeah, so Elevate, the idea, we partnered with a bunch of other organizations to start it, was Toronto Waterloo corridor has an interesting problem. It started building a reputation globally of being a big city, of being a tech hub, being exciting. But for whatever reason, I find people don't believe it until they visit. And so the idea behind Elevate was, let's coordinate a big week where anyone that's sort of interested in coming to the region but hasn't come before now has an excuse to come. And once they get here, they'll have enough random collisions and see enough activity that they become enticed to work with the region. So that was the purpose behind Elevate. And now how it's being executed is we have a few different streams and it changes every year, like fintech or AI, and it's a typical conference where you get big speakers to come and speak. The idea is to showcase the best of this region and grab people from around the world, so they come here, see what's happening, and get it goes from being something they read on a website to actually seeing in person, and they now becomes real. And it's interesting. It's going back to working from home. This is like people. You'd assume in today's age and technology, if people read about something, they believe it. But it's just a different thing when it's like, I even see this with TechTO. We have founders come from the valley and like, holy, there's so much energy here. This ecosystem must be thriving, and it's the same thing. That was the goal with Elevate. Do that on a larger level and give people a reason to buy a ticket and come out.
A good thing. Last question. The students who are watching this will eventually be graduating, some of them sooner than others. But I was keen, given the experience that you have, the areas that you focus in, what advice would you have for them on maximizing their career success, whatever they might go into? What would your life lessons or career lessons be
Well,
for them?
first of all, I define what success looks like to you. Too many people just think it's money. Too many, some people think it's happiness. So first of all, success is a word you can define, and you may not, and you may redefine it several times through your career. So I think that's the first thing. I think the second thing is think long term, and what I mean by that is try to remember. It's not what this current step does. It's what does this current step teach you? What opportunities does it open? And don't focus on whatever is just going to be immediate payoff. It's what, and there's many different, again, depending on how you define success, there's many different things that you can get out of any one job. It could be money, it could be connections, it could be learning. And I think the one thing that's, of all those three, I think money is the one that's most overrated, because long term, if you, again, I maybe I'm a bit naive, but I think if long term, if you add value to society, you'll find a way to get paid back. It's just maybe not as much as you like, but that's a whole other question. Contacts, I think just treating people right and trying to help other people will allow people to help you. And it's random and different people. Like I know a lot of people. I'm not great at building it, but just knowing that I'll do well for others has helped me a lot in life. And I think that's something it's an attitude you take to life. And just if that's a strength of yours, you play to it. If not, it's just treat people well. And I think the third one is learning. Is the question is what to learn. I think it's a mix of what you enjoy, but also what's useful to society and where you can be an expert. Yeah, I think if I look back at my career, what I could have done better. Look, I'm an ex-investment banker, an ex-consultant. Great. The people who've done best with that either are very special in one part of finance or a consultant in one aspect. They're the ones that have the most leverage. It's also like maybe if you in 2013, 2014, it was easy to become an expert in blockchain. Now be well connected. So I think the mistake people try to do is they try to learn either something that's it's trying to find. I think the best way education is and again, there's also soft skills about managing a team and learning and how to motivate people. Those there's some basics that are always valuable to learn, but I think if the way to distinguish yourself from education is where can I learn something? Again, goes back to secrets. Where can I learn something that puts I can be best in class quickly and that overlaps with my interest in what's good, where there's potential for society. And none of these are easy, and it's hard. And I think it's just it's your career is what you make of it. And I wish I had better advice than that. And I've taken some normal routes, I've taken some abnormal routes, and sometimes I wish I'd done more of both.
Don't we all? But I thought that was great advice. Thank you, and I also appreciate you talking to me today and answering all these questions, Alex. I think your answers will be very helpful to the people who will be watching this.
I hope so, Peter. Thank you for asking me to speak with you.